Okay, welcome everybody to episode 4 of AMHIE on Air. Today we're going to be talking with a couple of experts in the area, in the subject, a little bit about the newest sort of white paper that's just come out in February. So obviously everybody's having a little bit of discussion about this, but we wanted to pinpoint on something particularly because recently with Children's Mental Health Week and, we've been talking a lot about belonging, and that's something that features in the white paper 27 times actually, which is quite a lot. So what we want to be talking about today is, between two wonderful people who I'm going to go out to now and have them have a little introduction and a little chat about what they've been doing. So, Mohammad, let's start with you if you want to have a little chat about where you're from and what you've been doing.
Thank you, Ili, and it is genuinely a privilege to be on AMHIE on air. When I was first approached for this episode, I have to be honest, belonging in education is not a topic I expected to be talking about on an international podcast. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized it connects to everything I do every single day. My name is Mohammad Umaid. I am director of Al-Fateh Institute of Health Sciences in Islamabad, Pakistan, an institution we have built at the intersection of industry standard technology and healthcare education. In partnership with organizations like IBM, Oracle Academy, Cloudera, Snowflake, and Lenovo. I also serve as an ambassador for DASCN, the Data Science Institute Network, where I work on what professional resilience looks like in an era of rapid technological disruption. I was invited to present this framework as a keynote at the AI Orta International Conference in Kazakhstan just 2 weeks ago. And I've been writing on these themes most recently in a piece called Architect Your Career to Become an AI Orchestrator. Now, why does any of this matter for this conversation about belonging in school? Because every framework I build, every credential I earn, every institution I work with, it all traces back to one foundational question that I first asked as a young person. Why does a single piece of paper define a person's worth? That question was about belonging. It was about whether the system had space for someone like me. I am here today not just as an academic leader, but as someone who knows what it feels to be outside from the system looking in, and who has spent their career trying to redesign system so others do not have to feel that way. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Mohammed. Gosh, you've done a lot, haven't you, recently? I didn't realize you'd been so busy. Blimey.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Well done, you. Well done for your award. That's amazing. So
thank you
let's
for the
briefly
appreciation.
we'll touch back on you in a moment, sir. So let's just have a quick chat with you, Nicola. If you want to give us a little bit of an insight. So maybe not quite as in depth as
No.
Mohammed. He's been doing a lot.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Nicola Bailey. The last time I did a podcast, I think I was still an assistant head teacher, but I've decided to move on and to do some other things. So at the moment, I'm quite freelance, working with schools, local authority, very much focused on that concept of belonging, very much concept focused on mental health, well-being, safeguarding, SEND, and intersectionality and racial equity. So that's just a little bit about me.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah,
That's
I
nice.
didn't actually realize, podcast listeners, until I emailed Nicola that she's moved on from her role as assistant head teacher. So that was a big bit of news that I got this week, which is, a big life change. So
Yeah.
Okay, so without further ado, should we get bit deeper into a little bit of a deep dive, a little bit of a chat? So I've got some questions for you. Let's start off with number one. So we sort of talked a little bit about the white paper in the introduction. There's a theme of culture throughout it, and also the new Ofsted frameworks that have been coming through. We want students to feel like they belong. But as soon as you start grading a school on atmosphere, does the magic of a supportive classroom get replaced by performative evidence gathering? How can you prove in that sort of environment that a child feels safe without ruining the feeling? So let's have a little move on to you there, Mohammed. What do you think about that?
This question cuts right to the heart of something I encounter constantly in institutional leadership, and I want to name it precisely. What we are really asking is whether measurement corrupt culture. And I think the answer is it can, but it does not have to. In my work on AI governance and digital transformation, we talk a great deal about what I call the difference between velocity and governance. In the AI world, we are seeing organizations rush to deploy AI systems because they look impressive on paper. They perform well on benchmarks. They generate beautiful outputs, but they are not actually solving human problems. The metric has replaced the mission. Schools are experiencing the same crisis. When Oxford arrives, what happens? Staff put together portfolios of evidence, behavior policies are tightened, children are told, often implicitly, that this week matters more than any other week. And in doing so, the school communicates something profoundly damaging, that belonging is a performance, not a reality. The white paper says belonging appears 27 times. That tells me the architects of this document understand its importance. But belonging, like trust, is destroyed the moment it becomes a target. The moment you say prove it, you have already undermined it. So, what is the alternative? I would argue what I call a shift from output metrics to ecosystem indicators. In the institution I work with, we do not just measure a student produced, we map the conditions that what is possible. We asked, does this student have access to relationship safe relationship with at least one educator? Does the student feel their identity is valued in this space? Can they take a risk, academic, social, emotional, without the fear of ridicule? These are harder to measure than attendance rates or test scores, but they are precisely what the white paper is pointing at. You cannot inspect your way to belonging. You have to build it slowly, relationally, and with every adult in the building acting as if it matters on every ordinary day. Thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, foundational is definitely the way I would put it. In some of the sort of most recent talks and things I've been to, that's definitely what they've been talking about. Sort of fundamental, it's the underlying sort of aspect of education. Would you agree, Nicola? Do you think that that's
Yeah,
what we're talking about?
yeah. I think one of the words that he used, which was quite interesting, and which is it pins from both the Ofsted framework and the white paper, is the word consistency. And when Mohammed mentioned that, very often when inspectors are coming, children are told this is very important, you've got to say this and you've got to behave in a particular way. We're supposed to be looking at what really happens in the school, and the fact that, yes, I know we will have to say to the students, come on, we're all in it together. but these things should be embedded, and these things should already be happening within schools. So when the inspection comes, it's not something that you suddenly pull out of a hat and that you start to demonstrate that all our children belong. You know, look at this, we all belong all of a sudden. This should be something that should be felt. It should be run through, sorry, the whole framework, and the culture of the school needs to have that sense of belonging, not just something that comes out every now and then. I think some of the other points that Mohammad did touch upon was thinking about it does become a performance when it's a glossy magazine, or it's a, you know, posters on the wall, but are we asking the right questions? And my first question would be, do school leaders understand what belonging looks like? Do staff understand what belonging looks like? Do inspectors? What exactly does that criteria of belonging look like? What data? So first of all, we're going to be looking at data. So they would probably look at data, attendance, progress 8 scores. They'd be looking at those things that, you know, make it a performance, to say, oh, look, we do well with all of this. This shows that our children feel like they belong. But I would scratch the surface, because that's the sort of person I am. And I would say, okay, give me your data on, for example, racist incidents. Give me your data on SEN. How do the SEN students, you know, if you call a school and you say, this is the student council, how is your student council representative of the students? Is it just all your top performing children, or is it those children from the SEN groups, from the free school meals, your young carers? What do you know about the groups of children? What does your school look like? What does your leadership team look like? Is it everybody that looks the same, everybody with the same thinking, or is it diverse in the way that children can see themselves reflected in the leadership team? You know, these things make belonging. You know, do the school have a policy and a philosophy for co-production? You know, where are the parents in all of this? You know, so for me, it's, do we actually understand what belonging is, or are we just using it as another set of data that if you tick the boxes, then yeah, that's a school that belongs, where we're not really going through and you know, using a fine-tooth comb to really see whether or not this is a place where students belong. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, that was amazing. Sorry, you
Yeah.
touched
Yeah.
everything there. I think it's what Mohammed was saying was very much kind of, is it measurable? And what you're saying is yes. However, what we need to think about is how that looks. So
Yes.
what would you think about what Nicola said there, Mohammed? Like any of the things that she's picked out to measure? Do you think that you would be able to do that at your setting?
Yes, exactly what Nicola has said is very true. And the thing is that the more universal we make our measurement, and we involve the emotional intelligence as well, because the person who we are reaching out is a child, and that child has a future, and our activity today can make a long lasting impact on that child. So what we have to do is we have to look after that child, and we have to adopt methods that are universal so that it can be adopted to children around the world as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for different cultures, isn't it? And I
Yeah.
suspect that being an international setting like yourselves, you know, you experience that daily, that you know, children from other cultures, or, you know, I suppose it's different 'cause you're a higher institution, but people from other cultures, it's something that can be hugely impactful in how people feel they belong.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, that is true.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's have a little look. We're going to move on a little bit. So we're sort of moving on a little bit to something that I think Nicola touched on, which was inclusion. And what we're going to talk about is the white paper identifying a desire for internal exclusion. So they're saying that for a student experiencing mental health difficulties, is keeping them on site at all costs actually a compassionate act, or are we just trapping distressed children in an environment that's, potentially causing them more distress? So let's move to you first on that one, Nicola, if you're happy
Yeah.
to come through.
Yeah. So for me, Our students are human. I think that's really important. And I know sometimes when I'm having a day that I cannot cope. As a human being, I just need space and I need to be sometimes away from everything that's going on. Our students are no different. I personally have sent children home who have not been able to cope with what's going on. They've had something happen and they just need that space. Um, that's not about attendance data. That's not about curriculum, loss of curriculum. That's about a circuit break so that child can go away. They can actually re, gather themselves, become regulated, and then return the next day. That's not for behaviour issues. That's not saying a child has done something. This is saying that this child is in crisis and this child actually needs to be in a safe environment, and that isn't sometimes in the school. I think we have to treat children individually. Our students need to be treated individually, and there is definitely a place for saying, yes, we keep the child in school because it's a safeguarding issue. We know where they are. We keep them in school so that there is curriculum continuity, so there's no loss in their learning. We'll keep them in school because we can do support for them. We can give them interventions and we can give them support. However, if we're doing it just so that the data looks good, the attendance stays up, they haven't, are we being compassionate? Are we doing it for the child, or are we doing it just so that, our data looks consistently good? And I think sometimes, internal inclusion can be amazing, for all the reasons that I've said, and it also can be used as a transition. So we've had children who for them coming into school was challenging, and so what we've done, we've used the internal areas where they can actually come back in and they're away from everybody else. It's a quiet space, and then they're able to transition slowly back into lessons. It can be that bridge that some children need. However, when you are placing children in areas for internal exclusion, and this is going on for days, weeks, sometimes half a term, this is where I'm saying, what is the purpose behind it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes back to something we touched on a little bit earlier, but I think it's down to the individual child, isn't it? And, and that's very much, to do with belonging.
Yeah.
So what's your experience at your setting, Mohammed, with exclusions?
Well, I appreciate the directness of this question because the honest answer is it depends entirely on what on-site actually means. And right now,
Mhm.
far too many students in too many schools on-site means isolated, unsupported, and held in close proximity to everything that is causing them harm. In any system, whether we are talking about an AI deployment or a school pastoral structure, the question we need to ask is not what does the policy say we must do, but what does this specific human need right now? The white paper's preference for internal exclusion over permanent exclusion is well intentioned. Permanent exclusion has catastrophic long term outcomes. We know this. But the assumption embedded in keep them on site is that the site itself is neutral. That is the safe container. And for a student experiencing a mental health difficulty where their distress is being triggered by the social dynamics, the academic pressure, the noise, the timetable, the very smell of the corridor, the site is not neutral at all. It is the source of the stress response. In my institute, we work extensively with the concept of psychological safety. When a learner's nervous system is in a state of threat, when their brain is, as neuroscience puts it, in survival mode, no learning can occur. No belonging can be felt. The body is too busy scanning for danger to be. in connection. So keeping them on site in a room where a single adult with a worksheet is not inclusion. It is containment dressed up as compassion. And I think we owe it to the children to be honest about the distinction. What would genuine compassion look like? It would look like flexible, personalized response, time in a quieter environment with a trusted adult, a modified timetable that reduces the pressure triggers while maintaining connection, family involvement from day one, because parents know their child better than any school can in a 6 hour window. The goal is always reintegration, but reintegration into what? Into some unchanged environment or into a school that has used this time to understand what the child needs and has made genuine adjustments. The white paper is right that exclusion should be a last resort, but the answer is not simply stay in the building. The answer is we are going to redesign this child's experience of this building so that it becomes a place that he can belong to. So, this was like what I wanted to say. And what Nicola said exactly as well, those points about involving the child as well and providing them with the right tools and the needs, those were all right as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my experience, one of the children that I teach, she's actually permanently excluded from school because of what you were just talking about, Mohammed. She had, she was under threat when she was at school because she was being bullied, and for her, there was no fixing that environment, and they tried a lot of different measures. Some of the things that you've described, Nicola, and also yourself as well, Mohammed, and unfortunately for her those measures it couldn't they couldn't help her to feel more comfortable, to feel like she belonged. So actually what's happened is she's ended up coming out of school permanently and being homeschooled instead. So do you think that there's like a capacity to bridge a gap at all, or do you think that once a child is out of school, that's it, they stay out, Nicola?
No, I think there should be flexible arrangements as well. Definitely flexibility is required. A clear, robust plan of, we talk about plan, do, review, but how often is that used when we're dealing with students with mental health? What are we hoping to achieve? Are we hoping to just have the child back in school, or are we hoping to address some of the needs that make the learning environment difficult for the child? I think it always has to be a starting point to think, what are we looking to achieve long term? And it's not about just getting them in the building. That is so short-sighted, and it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the child, definitely doesn't help the child, and it doesn't help the school in the long run, because it's just going to be a lot of resources onto a child where you're not actually addressing the issue. For example, I will give a quick example: bells. Bells in a school can be so distressing for adults, never mind children, especially the neurodiverse children. And it's something that can be so quickly just changed. It's a reasonable adjustment that a school can make, but yet many schools find that difficult to do. And it's like, well, why? If you know that it's going to be a factor that's going to adversely impact on some of your students, why wouldn't you want to change it? Why wouldn't you want to find an alternative? And we can always find alternatives if we are willing to, which then comes back to the question and the theme of belonging. you know if you've got children who can't handle the bell, but yet you're ringing the bell, how do they feel as though they belong, that their voice is being heard? So it's about thinking we can use these places, these spaces, as transition points or as bridges, but it's about, like Mohammed said, what are you offering? I've always said, you can say to a child who's got low attendance, come into school, come into school. But what exactly are you giving them when they come in, other than maths and English? we'll talk about relationships, we talk about a relational approach, but when that child comes into that building, what are they going to see? What are they going to experience? And the word psychological safety is so paramount, because for some students, schools aren't psychologically safe. For some adults, schools are not psychologically safe. So if you're bringing them back in, you have to first ask yourself, what do you want to achieve? And what is that child coming back into?
So how about for yourself, Mohammed? Would you agree with what Nicola said there about children who have left school coming back in? Do you think that what she's saying there is what you would mirror at your institution?
Yes, exactly what she said is quite right. And on a personal note, like in Al-Fateh Institute of Health Sciences, we have a course that is called Diploma in Pharmacy Technician. So that is a 2-year course, and the entry requirement is basically a trick, but there is no age limit. So if a person is like 18 years old, he can do the course as well. If he is 28, 38, so basically it doesn't count. So we provide a route for a student to come back and learn. But the people who are coming in at a later stage, basically those will become successful who will have some aim or a goal. If they want to learn new skills, to have some more earning, or they want to open a new business, or they want to study more so that they can gain more knowledge or have more qualification. So there must be a purpose to coming back to education, because without purpose it will be usually like for wasting the time and things like these. But knowledge is always useful and purposeful. So we should always welcome students to come back and learn, and through career counseling and guidance, we can provide them with a goal that they can go for, and they can achieve those things and make their life better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's key, isn't it? Like, not just coming back. It's about coming back for a reason and having a purpose and understanding there is goals. Because sometimes that can help, can't it? Like even just having just a reason, a goal to come back to.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's move on to sort of our final sort of talking point a little bit here as well. So just to touch on at the end there. So the white paper is acknowledging for the first time that staff abuse and complaints are at an all-time high. It's suggesting that schools' mental health culture starts with protecting staff. So, Mohammed, in your experience, can a school actually improve mental health if the teachers themselves are operating in a survival culture?
No, I will say it plainly, you cannot build a culture of belonging for children inside an institute where the adults are not themselves safe, seen, or valued. It is not possible. It violates every principle of systematic design. In the work I do on digital transformation and resilience, I use a framework called the career hedge. The idea that individual and institutions must build layered adaptive capabilities rather than depend on a single rigid structure. A school's mental health culture works exactly the same way. You cannot have one load bearing pillar, the extraordinary pastoral who absorbs everything, the one counselor who the whole system funnels towards. You need distributed resilience across the whole institution, and that starts with the staff. The white paper, acknowledging that staff abuse is at an all time high, is significant, not because the situation is new, but because it has been named at policy level. What we know from organizational psychology and what I see replicated across educational institutions internationally is this: an educator who is experiencing chronic stress, unsupported conflict, and a sense of powerlessness within their own professional environment will, however good their intention, transmit the dysregulation to the children in their care. This is not a moral failure. This is a neurological reality. We regulate one another. Children are extraordinarily sensitive to the emotional state of the adults around them. A teacher who walks into the classroom carrying unprocessed fear, frustration, or exhaustion in through body language, tone, micro expressions, communicating that state to 30 young people. So, what does protecting staff actually look like? Not just well being days and fruit bowls in staff room. It means genuinely distributive leadership where no single person is expected to hold the emotional weight of the whole school. It means supervision structures, something clinical setting take or granted, but education has largely ignored. It means clear escalation pathways for staff experiencing abuse, not just for students. I also think it means reframing what professional development looks like for educators. In my institute, we invest heavily in what I call governance literacy, helping people understand the system they operate within so they feel agency rather than helplessness. Teachers need the same. When an educator understands the policy landscape, when they understand why the white paper says what it says, what choices they actually have within the system, they move from reactive survival mode to something closer to professional agency. And that agency is contagious. The evidence is unambiguous. Student well-being and staff well-being are not parallel tracks. They are the same track. A school that invests in one while neglecting the other is not building a culture. It is papering over a structural fault line. So the importance of teachers are very much specifically in our culture. Like they are a teacher is considered a father or a mother-like figure, and there is a lot of respect for teachers, not just by students, but the entire triangle of education, including the principal, the school staff, and the parents as well. So the mental relief and we have to do that for the teachers as well, provide them with good environment, provide them with better growth opportunities, because they are creating the future of the country. The future of the country is depending on the training and the knowledge imparted by these teachers. So the better we treat them, we can expect them to treat our children even better. So I will say these things. Thank you.
Gosh, yeah, no,
This
I
is
think I agree with pretty
God.
much everything you said there.
Yeah, there's a
So
lot.
what's your thoughts there, Nicola? I mean,
Yeah,
anything to add?
yeah. I think I delivered some training earlier this year, and one of the activities I did was I think it was a teacher workload survey, and you know I did it where you stand up if you agree, if it's higher or lower, and what the survey found was completely different to what everybody else found. And I'm not saying that there aren't improvements, but it goes back to when we talked a bit about belonging at the start, and where we talked about what questions are you asking, and how are you asking the questions? Because if you look at that survey, things are definitely getting better. For schools are just wonderful places for teachers to work. Yet we are stuck in a retention and recruitment crisis, and we are finding that nearly a third of teachers are saying that they are looking for an exit route. Um, and that is not because teachers don't love their job, that they don't love their students. So if it's not that, what are the conditions that are causing staff to actually think, I can't do this job anymore. You know, we talked many years ago about teaching being a vocation. You don't come into teaching because you want to be rich or anything like that. You do it for the love of the kids, the love of the job, and sometimes the love of your subject. So for me, when we think about teacher well-being, we need to be looking at what, like, you know, Mohammad said earlier, it's not about those performative things of saying you belong because I bought you some cakes into the staff room. It's about actually thinking, is this person tired? And if this person is tired, if they're overwhelmed, if they're overworked, if they're just functioning at a surface level, are they able to pour into our students? Are they able to give the students what they need? Are they going to be attuned to the needs of the students? And I think when we start to look at it from that point of view, that's when we start to have to think about, or is a member of staff who is almost burnt out going to be productive and effective in the classroom, you know? And how then do we go about trying to support that member of staff? I think that's really, yeah, that's the crux of it, really. You know, you can't expect someone to keep on, you know, going when they're tired, And, people always say, yes, it's okay for you. You get all the holidays. What do we do with those holidays? What do teachers really do during school holidays? We mark, we plan, we prepare, we then try to book onto a holiday, but we find that the holiday prices, and this is just me on my soapbox, the holiday prices are treble. So we can't even go to really nice places. So, you know, it's thinking about things like that. Not everybody's on a really mega wage as a teacher. So all those things you have to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, that's so important, you know, because in my experience, you know, talking to the education community, I know very well that they are working evenings and weekends because that's when I get replies to emails. And it's not great, is it? It's not a great working environment when the expectation is that, you know, you're always on the job, so to speak.
Yeah.
So just sort of expanding on that question a little bit for both of you, and
Yes,
I'll probably,
really.
yeah. I wonder whether there's any training that you think that maybe the DFE could you know, put out there to help support educators. Is there anything specific? So something that I've come across recently was potentially giving teachers some training on how to communicate better with parents. So, you know, going along the theme of the complaints and how that's themed. One of the thing that was identified is that teachers understand a lot about how to talk to and communicate with children. They a lot of early years not early years, a lot of teachers that have just come out of education, just come out of their own education and moved straight into a teaching role. You know, they've just been taught how to teach children and how to communicate with children. And actually, that's the wavelength that they're operating at. But actually, do they know how to then communicate with parents? So I wonder whether there was any options, any teaching the teachers, teaching people within education that you think the DFE could be offering to support. So for you, Nicola, was there anything you thought there? Or?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's more work that could be done around understanding mental health, understanding neurodiversity, definitely around SEMH and behaviour, that the two don't always have to be, you know, let's separate it sometimes. You know, we know that behavior is a form of communication. You know, maybe more work on speech and language, where a lot of children are saying it's their behavior, but actually it's their challenges that they have with communication. So I think that would be really good. I think what also staff need to be trained on is the ever-changing society in which we live in, and the use of technology, and how students use technology, and how their brains operate as compared to 20 years ago. I will confess, when I first started teaching, I actually had a blackboard and I wrote on a blackboard. You know, 30 years later, it is completely different. Yet we're expecting our children to sit, we're expecting our children to just listen, where that's not how they are programmed anymore. And I think we need to be more understanding of that. You know, we talk about wanting our children to be resilient, but our children already are resilient. But how do we bring out those resilient skills, for example? You know, we talk about we want them to have attention spans. That's great. But if you are doing an activity with a textbook and they are copying off the board, is that going to be the best use of their time? Which then goes back to this idea of purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing in this school, in this lesson for this child?
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. So, Mohammed, same question to you. You know, if you could pick some lessons, some teaching, some learning that teachers could go through to help support them a little bit
Yes,
with what's going
exactly.
on.
Yes, exactly. I have listened very carefully to what Nicola said. And in her previous answer, she really very rightly mentioned the difficulties faced by the teachers. But I would like to add that a person becomes teacher not by chance, but by choice. You can be chosen a teacher, but until and unless that teacher doesn't have a choice, he doesn't have his own feeling of becoming a teacher, because he knows that there will be hardships, there will be sacrifices. But what makes a teacher is not the knowledge, but his will to impart that knowledge to other children, to show others by action, and to make the subject interesting and good for other people. That is what makes the teacher a teacher. And the difficulties that they faced, as an institution, what we can do is we can support them. And for that, first we have to understand it. We have to understand that every teacher is different. The teacher is unique. They have their own teaching method through which they are able to make the children learn the concepts. So we have to agree with them, we have to respect them. You know, they say you don't have to accept a person, but you have to respect a person. So we don't have to accept everything that we say is happening around us, but we have to respect those things. So with the teachers, again, what I mentioned previously, the more better we treat our teachers, the respect we give it to the teachers, and the material we provide them, the opportunities to learn, to grow. And along with that, with the students, we are providing them with the counseling, career counseling, depending on their age, providing them with the support, because we have to see that person is not one being. That person is actually three beings. The first is the physical being, the second is the mental being, and the third is the emotional being. And we have to address all those beings, you know. So we have to have the knowledge, the information, the will, and the environment as well. And the environment we create by culture, by implementing them, by telling each other. Because you know, when you see an ocean, it is just water. But if you take one drop out and you say, now how many drops there will be? So every drop has combined to make that entire ocean. And similarly, everyone in that team, it has a role to play. And together, collectively, it becomes into action as well. So this is.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely agree with you know, and it is about a whole team, a culture, and you both mentioned that, you know, as we've been discussing. So, Nicola, anything else to add on our theme today?
Um, I think it's just really important that we think about why we do what we do, when it comes to well-being, mental health, and that idea of belonging. You know, that first question about, you know, does it become a performance? And I think no school leader would say, no, we're just performing. But I think once they have an idea of exactly what belonging is, and just being clear, this is what you need to be asking, you know, once that's there, I think we would see a big shift in um, figures, the data that the, you know, that the DFE and Ofsted want to see. You create that culture first, that authentic culture, and then all those other metrics and all those other KPIs, they will, hopefully fall into place, as long as you start from a genuine place of wanting every student to belong.
Absolutely.
And purpose. Sorry, I would say purpose as well, and making sure that the students have a purpose and that there is a reason for them to want to come into school, which obviously is because they feel safe, they feel belonging is about safeguarding as well. That's one thing I will add. I saw a great picture the other day, and it was like a rock, and then there was two sides, and it was saying that criminal exploitation, CSE, and all these things that are taking our children are able to do that because the institutions that should be safeguarding the children aren't providing that. They can find belonging elsewhere, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's quite profound, that, isn't it?
Yes,
quite profound. And so, Mohammed, anything else to add on our main theme today for yourself?
Yes, Lily, I want to leave this conversation with one image that stays with me. In my writing, I talk about the shift from inherited paths to designed futures. The idea that the next generation cannot simply wait for a system to validate them. But here is what that requires. It requires that at some point, somewhere in their educational journey, a young person encountered an adult who made them feel that they were worth designing a future for. That their presence in that classroom, that college, that institution was not conditional. Belonging is not a policy outcome, it is a felt experience, and it is built or broken in the ordinary moments. That corridor conversation, the teacher who remembers your name on a bad day, the classroom you were allowed to not know the answer. The white paper has named it 27 times. Now the work is to make it real in every building for every child on every ordinary day. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Nicola. And thank you to AMHIE for creating a space where these conversations happen. So it has been a great honor and a privilege to be part of this esteemed program. And I'm really very thankful. And as I am before Nicola came, as I mentioned to Lily as well, I will just repeat those words that in Pakistan, we Al-Fateh Institute of Health Sciences is a member of Health Information for All, HIFA, which is an NGO with WHO, and we are supporting mental health care as well by providing the right information. Because it all starts by providing the information. Because when a person has information, then that person has a choice to implement or not. But if he doesn't has the information, he is in loss at everything. So what we are doing is we are providing that information, that yes, you have a right to adopt to this information. Because what usually happens is that due to stigma and not feeling good, people don't go out and express their mental health problems. So we are telling them to go out to express them, and if they express it in time, before time, then the damage can be reduced. But if they delay it, it can cause harm to them as well as their family and loved ones. So this is it here.
Oh, thank you very much, Mohammed. Eloquently put, it's beautiful. And thank you very much, Nicola, for stepping in and coming on this fireside chat. And that's it for Amy on Air today. And watch out, and we'll be coming up with episode 5 very soon.
Thank you. Thank you to both of
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you to
Take
others.
care.